What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most noble, dignified leading men actually grew up in chaos? Gregory Peck, born in 1916, didn't start life with the golden touch. His parents' marriage collapsed when he was just a boy, and instead of being raised in the safety of a stable home, he was shuffled into the care of his grandmother. Imagine being that young, abandoned by both parents, already learning what loneliness feels like. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of breaking him, those early wounds gave Peck something rare, a deep, quiet strength. He grew into a tall, commanding presence, the kind of man you couldn't ignore when he walked into a room. Yet back then, nobody thought this kid from La Jolla, California, would one day redefine what it meant to be a Hollywood star. When Peck made it to the University of California, Berkeley, everything changed. He stumbled into acting almost by accident, but the moment he stepped on stage, it was like fate finally revealed itself. Classmates described him as magnetic, almost larger than life. And deep down, Peck knew this wasn't just a hobby. This was the thing that could take him out of obscurity and into history. Hollywood wasn't ready for Gregory Peck, but once he arrived, there was no turning back. He started on Broadway, and within months, his sheer presence made directors take notice. And this wasn't the slick, polished kind of actor audiences were used to. Peck had something different: sincerity. He didn't play the hero, he was the hero. By 1944, Peck made his film debut in Days of Glory, and it hit audiences like a thunderclap. Tall, striking, and with eyes that carried both kindness and authority, he didn't just look like a leading man, he felt like one. Hollywood was starving for authenticity, and suddenly here was Gregory Peck, the man who could embody warmth, strength, and morality all at once. And the momentum, it was unstoppable. In the very same year, he starred in The Keys of the Kingdom, earning his first Academy Award nomination. Who does that on their second film? It was unheard of. By the late 1940s, Peck wasn't just another actor, and he was the face of Hollywood integrity, a man so convincing on screen that audiences believed every word, every glance, every quiet pause. But here's the catch. Fame doesn't just bring praise, it brings pressure. Hollywood quickly branded him as the moral compass of American cinema, and while that made him a star, it also chained him to an image he'd never fully escape. Every actor dreams of that one role, the role that doesn't just win awards, but defines an entire generation. For Gregory Peck, that role came in 1962. When he stepped into the shoes of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, he wasn't just playing a character, he was becoming the moral conscience of America. Think about it. The civil rights movement was erupting, the country was divided, and suddenly here was Peck, standing tall as a lawyer who defended justice when it wasn't popular, when it was dangerous. His quiet strength on screen wasn't an act. It was Gregory's real-life belief that courage isn't loud, it's steady. And audiences felt it. They didn't just watch Atticus Finch, they trusted him. The Academy handed him the Oscar, but what he really gained was something bigger: immortality. Even decades later, school kids who've never heard of Gregory Peck know the name Atticus Finch. That's how powerful his performance was. But with that kind of fame comes a darker side, because the world didn't just admire him, they expected him to be perfect. And behind the glow of Hollywood lights, Peck's personal life was anything but perfect. In 1942, he married Greta Kukkonen, a strong-willed Finnish-American woman, and together they built a family. 3 sons, a beautiful home, the picture of stability. To the outside world, it looked like a fairy tale. But Hollywood is no fairy tale. As Peck's fame skyrocketed, the cracks in his marriage grew wider. By 1955, the couple's love had burned out, ending in a divorce that shocked their circle. For a man who stood for dignity on screen, failure in love was a wound that stung deep. And just when he thought the worst was behind him, tragedy struck years later in a way no Oscar, no fame, no success could protect him from. His eldest son, Jonathan, was found dead at just 30 years old. Authorities called it suicide. For Gregory Peck, it was the moment his world collapsed. He later admitted, "It's the most terrible thing that has happened to me in my life. You never get over a thing like that." This was the scandal Hollywood never saw in the magazines, while audiences worshipped him as Atticus Finch. Peck was a grieving father carrying a pain so deep it shaped the rest of his life. And that's what made his screen presence different. Because behind every role, there was real sorrow, real scars, and a man who knew that even heroes bleed. Just one day. That's all it took for Gregory Peck's life to flip again. The ink on his divorce papers wasn't even dry before Peck shocked everyone, marrying French journalist Veronique Pisani the very next day. To outsiders, it looked reckless, almost scandalous, but in truth, it was the beginning of the love story that would carry him through the rest of his life. Veronique wasn't a Hollywood starlet chasing fame. She was sharp, ambitious, and already established in her own right. The two had met years earlier in Paris, when she was assigned to interview him before he filmed Roman Holiday. That single meeting planted a seed, and years later Peck couldn't let her go. Together they built a family, 2 children, Anthony and Cecilia. Anthony would go on to follow his father into Hollywood, even marrying supermodel Cheryl Tiegs in a headline-grabbing romance that eventually crashed in divorce. Cecilia, meanwhile, became a filmmaker determined to keep the Peck storytelling legacy alive. Unlike Gregory's first marriage, this one lasted. Nearly 50 years of love, travel, culture, and family. But here's the thing, even though he found stability with Veronique, the shadow of his son Jonathan's death never left him. It haunted him quietly, even as he smiled for cameras and played the perfect husband and father. That's what made Gregory Peck fascinating. He was both the Hollywood dream and the man broken by real tragedy. Now here's where things get really interesting. Hollywood insiders always whispered about it. Gregory Peck versus Robert Mitchum. 2 giants. 2 total opposites. One represented dignity and moral strength. The other? A brooding rebel with danger in his eyes. When they faced off in Cape Fear, 1962, audiences felt the electricity. It was good versus evil, order versus chaos. But what most people didn't know is what Peck really thought of Mitchum. For decades, he stayed silent. No interviews, no gossip, nothing. Fans were left wondering, were they friends, enemies, rivals locked in silent war? And then, years later, Peck finally broke his silence, and what he admitted shocked everyone. He said Mitchum's acting wasn't acting at all. It was raw instinct, effortless, like he was born to be dangerous. Coming from Peck, a man of classical training, preparation, and precision, this was like a confession. It was respect, maybe even envy. But here's the twist. While Peck admired Mitchum's artistry, he didn't ignore the chaos behind it. Mitchum was known for run-ins with the law, a rebellious streak, and a refusal to play by Hollywood's rules. To Gregory, who valued family and discipline, Mitchum was a puzzle. But instead of condemning him, Peck said something stunning. He was his own man. He never tried to fit into anyone else's idea of what a movie star should be. That takes courage, and I respected that about him. So behind the scenes, this wasn't rivalry fueled by hate. It was rivalry fueled by respect. Two titans staring each other down, one polished, one raw, both knowing the other carried a piece of greatness the world would never forget. For Gregory Peck, family was never just background noise. It was his anchor. And even after unimaginable heartbreak, he poured himself into his children and grandchildren. What's wild is that the Peck name didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling. It kept evolving. His son Anthony followed in his footsteps, stepping into Hollywood with a recognizable face and carrying the weight of being Gregory Peck's son. His high-profile marriage to supermodel Cheryl Tiegs turned him into tabloid gold. But like so many Hollywood love stories, it ended in divorce. Cecilia, his daughter with Veronique, went a different route, choosing the behind-the-scenes power of filmmaking and producing. But perhaps the most fascinating piece of this legacy, his grandson, Ethan Peck. Today, millions know him as the man who brings Spock to life in Star Trek, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds. That's right. Gregory Peck's bloodline lives on not just in Hollywood, but in one of the most iconic sci-fi franchises of all time. The DNA of Gregory's dignity, presence, and quiet intensity runs through Ethan every time he steps on screen. It's proof that Peck wasn't just a star, he was a dynasty. His family carried forward the artistry, the storytelling, and the weight of his name. And yet, when you look deeper, you realize something. Behind all the glamour, this family story was written in both light and devastating shadow. June 12th, 2003. Hollywood lost one of its last true giants. Gregory Peck died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, taken by bronchopneumonia. On the surface, it looked like a quiet ending, but in truth, it was the close of an era. One of the final chapters of Hollywood's golden age slammed shut that night, and the tributes, they poured in like a tidal wave. Presidents, actors, filmmakers, world leaders, everyone wanted to claim a piece of Gregory Peck's legacy. But here's the truth. Nobody really owned it. Because what he gave the world wasn't just movies. He gave people a moral compass. He gave them Atticus Finch. He gave them dignity in a time when dignity was rare. At his bedside that final night was Veronique, the woman he had loved faithfully for nearly half a century. The woman who saw the actor, the husband, the father, and the broken man behind the Hollywood icon. And when the news broke, fans around the world didn't just feel like they had lost an actor. They felt like they had lost a piece of integrity itself. Gregory Peck's life was never perfect. It was messy, heartbreaking, and full of contradictions. But maybe that's why it mattered. Because in the end, his greatest role wasn't just Atticus Finch. It was Gregory Peck himself, a man who turned pain into compassion, tragedy into strength, and left behind a legacy that will outlive all of us. Gregory Peck wasn't flawless, and that's exactly what made him unforgettable. Behind the Hollywood spotlight was a man who carried heartbreak so heavy it could have broken him. But instead, he turned it into timeless art. He gave us heroes that weren't flashy or loud, but strong in silence. He showed the world that true courage isn't about being perfect. It's about standing firm when everything else falls apart. And maybe that's why even today, decades after his death, Gregory Peck still feels alive on screen, because he wasn't just acting, he was living his truth. Pain, scars, dignity, and all. The world may have lost Gregory Peck in 2003, but the values he stood for, those live forever.